This is Madison Wilson and Jamie Marrara interviewing Mrs. Jennifer Denslow, who is a speech, debate, and drama teacher at Oologah High School.
So our first question for you, Ms. Denslow, is have you always lived in Oologah?
I have not always lived in Oologah. I moved to Oologah 25 years ago, specifically to take the job here at the high school. Before then, I taught at a junior college in Parsons, Kansas for a couple of years. That followed right on my graduation with my master's degree from the University of Missouri at Columbia, Missouri. And most of my life before that I had spent in Oklahoma. So coming back to Oologah wasn't coming back to my hometown, but it was coming back to my home state.
Okay. What was your dream job while you were in kindergarten?
Oh, wow. While I was in kindergarten, I imagine that my dream job was I imagine that when I was in kindergarten, I wanted to be a ballet dancer because I was just enamored of how elegant and graceful they were, and I was really lucky. I went to a preschool in Ark City, Kansas. My family moved around a lot when I was smaller, like in grade school. But I went to a preschool in Ark City, Kansas that actually had ballet classes for the little kids. And I just adored the idea of being a ballerina because they were lithe and graceful and all of those things. And I was a chunky little toddler that thought that was just amazing.
So what made you decide to be a teacher?
Well, okay, this is actually a pretty good story. I never intended to be a teacher. And I went to college, and my father wanted me to be one of two things. He either wanted me to be an engineer or a teacher. I could not be an engineer because I'm really terrible at math. And my dad had been a construction worker and construction superintendent all his life, and he saw engineers and designers, architects and stuff as the people who made the real money. And he thought if I could be an engineer that I would be very well off, but I had to break it to him and go, look, Dad, I'm not good at math. This is not happening. And he also thought, well, maybe you should be a teacher. His aunt, Ollie Wagey, had been a teacher for many years in Oklahoma. She taught in a one-room schoolhouse, and then she taught in a grade school. She taught high school home economics. She was an amazing woman. She never married. Took care of her parents until they died, did amazing things like took off on a trip with 3 of her friends to go to the World's Fair in Chicago when roads between Oklahoma and Chicago were nearly non-existent. And I think he thought that I could be like his Aunt Ollie, like I could be an old maid school teacher. But when I was in college, what I would say is I didn't like teenagers when I was one. And I just couldn't imagine teaching little kids because I'm frankly not that crazy about little kids. So I decided I'm not going to do that. Well, I was going to go to grad school and be a college professor. So several years later, when I was at my first job working in a learning center at a junior college and working with a lot of international students and GED students and things like that, I kept going back to speech camp every summer and helping teach high school students how to do speech and debate. And I kept going back to my alma mater in Grove, at the high school there in Grove, and helping kids prepare to do speech and debate. So at camp one summer, over breakfast, my friend Janet Nobles, who was the speech coach at Bixby, said, you should really be doing this. You're really good at this and you love it. This is what you should do. And I said, you're right. And so even though I didn't have a degree in education, I got my alternative certification in speech, debate, and drama. And that's how I became a teacher. And it just worked out that following spring when I had my certification, the person who was the speech, debate, and drama person here at Oologah was retiring. And Linda Patton had been someone I admired for a really long time, even from high school, when she was the coach at Nowata. And when she found out that I was looking for a job, she encouraged me to apply. I'd gone to state that spring, the state speech tournament, to judge as a judge for Grove. And my former high school coach said, why don't you print off a flyer and put it in everybody's ballot bag and say, I'm looking for a job. Let me know if you know of anything. So Linda had seen that flyer. I printed them on Dayglow Orange and Dayglow Pink so nobody would miss them. And the only person out of like 150 schools at state who said they knew about a job was Linda. And she said, apply, get your stuff in. The deadline is tomorrow. We were at OSU for state. And I put my stuff in, and I know that she had to be a huge reason that they actually offered me the job. So that was 25 years ago, and they offered it to me. I took it. Linda introduced me to her students that spring, so they knew that she was handing the program over to me, and felt really, I felt like she was trying to make it clear that it was okay to them, that it was okay with her that I was taking this job. She was really sweet. And so 25 years later, you know, here I am still in the same classroom doing that same thing.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, it's a really good story. So what do you think makes your subject so important for students to learn?
Oh, my subject is entirely, my subject is so important for students to learn because my subject is about communication. And we cannot survive without the ability to communicate, to know ourselves deeply and understand ourselves and to make connections with other people. It's all about communication. So, you know, I say that like debate is the perfect storm of reading, writing, speaking, listening. Theater is an artistic form of communication. There are some things that you can't say point blank. You've got to express them artistically, and theater allows us to do that. You know, if we get into public speaking, extemporaneous speaking, people have to know about current events and what's happening in the world and analyze them. People who do interpretation events have to have empathy and know about psychology and how people work. So, but at the bedrock of all of that is just this idea that man is a communicating being, and my discipline, speech, drama, and debate, is all about communicating in all its various ways. And so I think that's why it's super important. I mean, every teacher thinks that their subject is the most important subject. I get that, but what they don't realize is that mine is.
Did you have a particular teacher or maybe just instance that connected you to drama and speaking?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. I talked about Janet Nobles being the person that sat across the table from me and told me that I should do this, and that was important. And but there were two other people, like Linda Patton, whose job I took here at Oologah. I already said she was someone that I knew since I was in high school. And the reason that she was always one of my role models was, and I think Jamie may have heard this story before, but when I was like a junior in high school, I was competing in original oratory. And Linda Patton was the judge at the back of the room. And so I'd gone into this round, and the person speaking before me, his name was Lyle Gregory. He's now a practicing lawyer in Kansas City. He got up into this oratory, and he was so good. Like, he was just, he had the voice of like a radio announcer, and he had this presence, and he was incredible. And I had to follow him. And so I got up to speak, and my speech was kind of about like, kind of the you win by losing kind of original oratory. And I started the speech, and I started thinking, you win by losing. That's what I'm doing. I'm losing. He was so incredible. I'm not going to be as good as him. I am definitely losing. And I totally psyched myself out to the point that I burst into tears, and I ran out of the room into the hallway. And Linda Patton followed me out in the hallway, and she said, I've got to tell you this story. She said, I tell this story to my daughter. Her daughter had gone to nationals in what was then women's extemp and oratory. And she said, I tell my daughter the story that Danny Thomas told to his daughter, and that is, you know, when a horse is in a race, they put blinders on it because looking at the other competitors will mess it up and it can't cross the finish line. And she said, Linda said to me, you've got to put your blinders on. You're really good at what you do, but if you pay attention to what other people are doing, it's going to mess you up. And it just influenced me so much that, you know, she wasn't my coach, but she cared about me enough to follow me out and tell me that. And years later, when I was in college and had some success on the college level, she sent me a note and congratulated me and said, hey, you've got your blinders on. I'm so happy that you're doing so well. So Linda was a big role model for me, and her welcoming me to this job as she retired was really important. But, you know, the most important teacher that I had was my high school speech and debate coach. And he is just a really incredible man. It's just that obviously we don't see each other as much anymore. But he saw something in me and helped me develop as a speaker and a debater. But also when I was a senior, he helped me prepare. He found the scholarship for me to apply for that paid for my college education. Like, he found this full ride scholarship and encouraged me to apply for it, drove my mom and I to Durant for the interviews, did mock interviews on the way. Like, he was so invested in my success. And so even though speech and drama, like, changed me and made me, you know, a more assertive person, better at communicating, all that, like, his interest in me went beyond that. He was just an incredible role model for me. Yeah.
So on that note, do you think that all students not only need a speech and debate education, but also can enjoy it and can connect to it?
Oh, absolutely. I think every student should take a speech class of some kind, or a drama class, like some kind of communication class that lets them overcome their fear. I mean, the fear of public speaking is probably, if not the most common fear in America, at least in the top 3. And I feel like if we help students early on learn to deal with that fear, that they can do anything. You know, a lot of teachers do speech assignments and speech projects in their classes, but what they don't do is they don't really address, like, how to get over stage fright or what to do if you're nervous. They just say, yeah, people get nervous, deal with it. But I feel like in my class, I give them some strategies, and also I give them enough opportunities to practice doing things that they can get over it. So when you go on to college and you have to take that required course, you're going to be fine. Or when you take a job and all of a sudden you're involved with, you know, organizing within your department and you are called on to, you know, give an update or something, you can do that. So yeah, absolutely. Every person should have some kind of communication experience.
What advice would you give, not just to teenagers here, but to your teenage self?
I would tell, I would tell every teenager, including my teenage self, that I think that as teenagers we feel like we're in a spotlight and every pair of eyes is on us, and we're super self-conscious about things, and the reality is that people are not actually looking at you and judging you as much as you think they are. Like, things that seem huge and end of the world to us as adolescents, in the long run, are not. And specifically, like, we feel like people are always looking at us and we're always in a spotlight and under a microscope, and other people are experiencing that in the same way. They don't have time to look at us and judge us because they're worried that other people are doing the same thing to them. And I feel like if we realized that we would take more risk and experience things. That fear keeps us from doing things that we could be really, really good at. Other people don't care as much as they think we do about the little things that seem really big to us. That's what I'd say.
So in your 25 years of teaching here at Oologah, how do you think teaching has changed? There are so many things. Obviously, you know, technology has changed immensely. When I walked into this classroom 25 years ago, there was no phone in the classroom. Obviously there was not a computer in the classroom for the teacher, let alone computers for the students, or, you know, the idea of laptops being something that would happen. So technology has really changed teaching, and not only the availability of technology in our classrooms, but also
the idea that people interact with technology in a way that I think has impacted how they interact with each other. It's harder, I feel, to get people to interact with each other in speech and drama classes sometimes because we spend so much time interacting with technology. And I think that I can see over the 25 years what a huge impact that's had on people. So obviously technology is the first answer. I think the other thing is that I feel like students maybe are more sheltered and protected from things in a way because our world has become more dangerous, and sometimes that's to their detriment. Like, I think that I see students in general as less willing to risk things, and they're far more concerned with, again, I'm making generalizations. I hate to see students overly concerned with getting the best grade when it means that they're not willing to learn something new and practice something and become good at it. I think students are less willing to take risks and get outside their comfort zone than they were when I started teaching.
So do you think this new technology changes the way that you, as a communications teacher, have to teach students how to interact with the world?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because, you know, when I went to college, you know, I took classes in interpersonal communication and talked a lot about how people communicate with each other on a face-to-face level, but there was nothing about how technology mediates that communication because that technology didn't exist. But it's a reality that now, not only do we have to learn how to communicate with each other, but we also have to learn how to leverage technology to do that. You know, it didn't really hit me until I was having a conversation a month or so ago with someone who had applied for a job, and their first interaction with the job was not going in for a face-to-face interview. They had to do like a video, they had to do a video and upload it for their first for the first screening part of the process. So what that tells me as a communications teacher is I not only need to talk to students about traditional like scholarship interviews and job interviews and working with people one-on-one and working in group, we also need to understand, like, if you do have to do that kind of thing, how do you deal with technology? What's your best way to present yourself that way? So all of those things impact the kind of communication I'm teaching, yeah, definitely.
So then what do you think is the future of education? Do you have any ideas about where we're heading?
The future of education, first of all, we have to face the fact that there are people that are interested in dismantling public education and making it so that only an elite few get an adequate education. And I think that we need to be real about that so that we can preserve public education. The future of education in general is that we have to make sure that we are not expecting our students to move in lockstep through our educational system, and that we have to offer them the opportunities to move at their own pace. Now, there's still got to be a place for a more traditional classroom where students interact with each other and a teacher without technology for a lot of the time to establish like their ability to communicate with humans. So, you know, we've got to preserve that because there are some things that we will never be able to learn with computers. But at the same time, you know, that just means that a teacher needs to evaluate, is this person ready to stand up in front of the class? Is this person ready to work with a group? Does this person need this or that? So I think the future is personalized, and we need to protect it.
To get a little more personal about our school, what is your favorite thing about Oologah High School?
My favorite thing is also sometimes the worst thing about Oologah, and that is I love the size of our school, that it is not too big. It is not too big and impersonal, and I love that when I see students graduate and walk the stage, that I can look at them and remember them as freshmen, and that I can pass them in the hall for 4 years and know them. And I love it that our school is like that. I don't think I would ever be happy teaching in a school that was the size of a small town. Like, I can't imagine being a part of a school like that. And I love the size of our school. And I know that's an advantage. That's my favorite thing. It's a disadvantage because, you know, in school that small, everybody knows everybody's business. And also sometimes there are opportunities we can't give our students because we're not bigger. But at the basis, I think it's a good thing that we can know each other and know our students.
How would you describe Oologah to someone who's never been here? Particularly like our community.
Okay, the community. Well, I tend to describe Oologah as a small rural community, and my husband and I disagree about that. He doesn't describe it as rural. I don't know how you can not describe it as rural, because to me, a suburban community is somewhere like Owasso, like it butts right up against a metropolitan area like Tulsa. And I feel like Oologah is a small rural community that is changing because of the influx of people coming up north from Tulsa, but that still has some of those rural things, like we've got plenty of nature to enjoy, and we've got plenty of space from the kind of, you know, loud, busy, crashing kind of scene you see in a big city like Tulsa. So I would say, yeah, I'd say rural and small town where people still care about each other and know about each other and what's going on.
Then what would you like the whole world to know about Oologah?
I would like to know, I would like the whole world to know that, you know, we claim Will Rogers as our favorite son, and then I would try to explain who Will Rogers is for the people that don't know. But that part of why it's important to celebrate him is something that you get in smaller communities, and that is this idea that, you know, he said, I never met a man I didn't like. And I think what that says about him was he had the willingness to, like, reach out and communicate with other people. And I think that's what you get in a town like Oologah, is that there's a space for people here, and it's more casual and less threatening than it is in a larger space. So that's what's good about us.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us. I really liked this interview.